If you weren't a big club before the financial rules came in, if you start to get it right, then there is suddenly this glass ceiling that you hit up against.
Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. Chelsea are off to a winning start under Xabi Alonso after a Cole Palmer-inspired 3-2 win against Fulham, and this Chelsea looks like it could be fun. As Uefa call off their threatened boycott of FIFA tournaments, we'll be asking if FIFA's president, Gianni Infantino, can still survive. And as another £100 million plus transfer nears completion, we'll be running our eyes over all the latest deals and asking if the Premier League is losing its mind. I'm Gregor Robertson, and joining me on today's show we have the chief correspondent for The Times and Sunday Times, Martin Samuel, the chief football correspondent for The Times and Sunday Times, Jonathan Northcroft, and the former Chelsea and Marseille striker and Times columnist, Tony Cascarino. Guys, great to have you all here. Mm-hmm. And Martin in particular, after so long away.
Yeah,
it feels
so
like
long
months
away.
and months and months.
Are you still with us, Martin?
Yeah, just about. Just about, mate, yeah.
Back in a £100 million plus transfer.
Yeah, I'm not here next week, though.
You're not?
No, I'm not. No.
Back on holiday?
Yeah, I'm on holiday next week, yeah.
Okay, well, good to have you here. Well, back with us. Loads of transfers and transfer market debate to get into in the second half of the show, but I always like to start with the actual football. You agree? I think.
Yeah.
Chelsea.
It's your show, you can start what you like.
It's my show today, yes.
All week here, I mean.
No, Tom, I'm in control. Right, we're starting with Chelsea Fulham because I thought they were a lot of fun. I've obviously been a bit critical of Chelsea in the past, but there was a lot to like about Xabi Alonso's first outing, Johnny.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it was a great opening weekend, and that was probably the best game of the lot, really. Had everything. I think you could see that Alonso's going to... He's going to be attacking. He's going to be intense. He's going to bring something different to Chelsea already. It made me think of Ruben Amorim, as many things do, because I'm still sort of like befuddled and angry about Ruben Amorim. But no, just that, that whole hype around the Amorim project. Oh, this 3-4-2-1, it doesn't work in English football, and poor old Ruben because he's got this magic system and it just doesn't work in the game. That's nonsense. It's how you enact a system. It's what you do with a shape on the pitch. And you could see Chelsea in that same shape, just playing a completely different way, playing in the opposition half. Lots of quick connections between the players actually close to each other. I really like that from a watching point of view, but from a coaching point of view, for a first outing, really impressive. And then, the biggest, most obvious thing is seeing that front three, which was magnificent in that match, and seeing a Cole Palmer re-energised, one of the best sights in football, but also seeing the connection with Morgan Rogers and João Pedro, who also, like Cole Palmer, looks like he's got something to prove after the World Cup snub that he had. At the other end of the pitch, obviously, there's a lot of work to be done for Chelsea, and I'm sure we'll talk about the goalkeeper. But I said it last week, I think they're, after Arsenal, certainly contenders for second. I think they're going to be a really good team this year.
Mm-hmm. Agree, Mart?
Yeah, I like Chelsea. I think they're a top four team. I think they've got players to come back. I mean, the defence was a little all over the place against Fulham, but that isn't Chelsea's defence, is it? The new signing, the fullback, Palastri, who will play either right wing back or left wing back, and then you've got Hato then might move to centre half, and there's a lot that
Hato wasn't bad actually.
I like it. I think he's getting a lot better, and he's not Marc Cucurella, but then Marc Cucurella wasn't Marc Cucurella when he first came to Chelsea. So I think that back 4-5 or what, I think that gets better if they change Sanchez for Martinez. I think that makes a huge difference. And then the rest of it, as John said, the front three look tremendous, look as good as anything you're going to find in the league. And it would be nice, speaking as someone who's got Chelsea fans in their immediate family, it would be nice to sit on the sofa and watch a Chelsea game without everyone being furious around me. So I've got enough problems with West Ham as it is. So, I don't really need to take on Chelsea's problems as well. And it's quite nice to see a team playing football that you look at the money that Chelsea have spent. That's the sort of football you should be playing. Yeah. That's what your team should look like. They should be a team that's good to watch. To spend as much money as Chelsea have done, and to end up quite a dull or pedestrian team, that's a complete failure. So this looked good. This looked good.
Cass, best front three potentially in the league?
Yeah. But I said to you last week, they're going to be fun, Chelsea, this year. And I always judge teams on how they get goals. And I always put the number, and I think I've chatted to you before, Gregor, about this, about how many bodies get in the 18-yard box. If you're getting 2 in there or 1, you're not going to score many goals. But when you get 4, 5, maybe even sometimes 6, there's problems for defenders because they've got to pick people up. And Chelsea are getting way more bodies. I saw a number of games in pre-season. Bodies into the 18-yard box was the big difference for me. And front three are loving it. You can see straight away. João Pedro could have had at least 2 on the night. You know, he could have. And you're looking at Cole Palmer. Is it coincidence that he's suddenly... And look, we know he had injuries last year. But is it coincidence that there's a little bit more freedom around him? Because when he gets freedom, and if he's doing his twisted and turning, he loses the ball and he hasn't got a manager going nuts at him, because, by the way, Maresca sometimes did do that last year because I was behind him in the dugout, that, you know, losing the ball in certain positions. And he knows he can. And they'll recover. Morgan Rogers just walked into the team and it felt like he was playing Villa left side for Villa at his very best.
How much does that kind of friendship... You know, you saw them afterwards having the interview and being best friends since they were kids, came through at Man City. Have you ever experienced that in any dressing room?
Andy Townsend. We were in the same team as 11-year-olds. Then we were together at Chelsea, and we were together with Ireland. But going back to Chelsea, you're going to see a lot of this all season, the way they play, their dynamism. It's going to be hard stopping them. And their problems are obvious. You can't tell any Chelsea fans or us in football that we all know what Chelsea's problems are. It isn't scoring goals.
So how have they let it come to this? Pete Rutzler wrote a piece about, there's this idea about Mike Penders coming through, they have a lot of faith in. And actually there's kind of underlying data that supported Robert Sanchez last season as having had quite a good season, despite the fact he was dropped at periods of that season. But, if you spend the best part of £2 billion, how can you leave yourself with a goalkeeping issue?
My theory on this has always been those Chelsea owners love trading, right? That's what they do. And the goalkeeper market just isn't as lucrative. So, they've been very clever at buying those, I think you've been writing about it, Martin, those sort of £20 million players, midfielders or whatever, wide players, and then turning a profit on them. Whereas the fees for keepers, and this is just, I haven't spoken to Chelsea about this, but this is just what I observe, fees for keepers are much more static. So they just don't seem to have been as active or as interested. I know they've bought lots of young goalkeepers, but in terms of trying to get first team goalkeepers, it's
hard to showcase them as well as much. You can maybe play some players in the cups and give them inflate their value.
When you think about
a goalkeeper.
Yeah, exactly. But when you think about the business they've done in every other area of the pitch since taking over, and then you compare it to what they've done at goalkeeper, they've not really tried in terms of senior goalkeepers. So I don't know. That's what I think's going on. But maybe they just think Robert Sanchez is incredible, and they've got data that none of us see.
It's almost as if, until they actually put that last jigsaw piece in place and go, right, there we go, they're not expected to do, at the moment, everyone is still saying, Chelsea, top 4, or, they could do, but they could. Why? Well, because they've got this glaring weakness at goalkeeper, and so no one looks at Chelsea and says, this is a team that should win the title. This is a team that should be winning the title. And if they don't win the title, they've fallen short. Everyone looks at it and it's still the work in progress. Once they get Martinez, you've got Xabi Alonso as your manager. You've got Martinez, you've spent $2 billion or whatever it is, on players. Well, now someone is going to turn around and go, well, we want to do what we used to do under Roman Abramovich for this. And, it's almost, I'm not saying that it's a deliberate thing, but it's almost semi-consciously as if until we, do this, we can hide behind the work in progress. because there's a lot more pressure when you're no longer a work in progress and someone says, right, you look at Arne Slot last season, even though they spent all of that money on new players, no one was buying, Liverpool work in progress. They won the league the previous season. Everyone thought, right, well, we should be winning the league. And when they didn't win the league and, spent a lot of the season going backwards, man gets a sack.
It's a weird one, isn't it? You look at goalkeepers and you think, Arsenal done great business, Raya, bringing him in, instrumental in them winning the league. Mm. You think of, Schmeichel before, you can think of Alisson at Liverpool, Edison at Man City, Cech at Chelsea, the importance of these great goalkeepers. And at the moment, we're in a bit of a weird world with keepers because, we joked there and said about the data, looking at data on goalkeepers. How in hell is he still the goalkeeper? And I'm not making him a scapegoat on that, is that if you've made that many mistakes, because he has, it's not just this week against Fulham. He's made a number of mistakes. Every Chelsea fan will tell you. Every pundit will say the same thing about Sanchez.
And he's not even that incredible with his feet.
No, what about when he miskicked on hit the ground? And I'm thinking, why have so many people got the blind spot on him as a keeper? You have to, if you're centre forward and you get chances and you miss, you'll eventually be taken out of the team. If you keep missing, it's the same for a goalkeeper. If you make mistakes, you should be out of the team. And he's somehow kept his place.
Like I said, we're going to talk a lot about transfers in the second half of the show, but it's impossible to talk about Chelsea without talking about transfers. There's always something going on. And you wrote this week, again, probably in the same sort of theme as you've just mentioned about moving from a bit of a project to a team that can challenge. This whole idea about them still potentially selling Enzo Fernández to Man City and filling a rival's hole or a need.
It's not that they can't replace him, because they're talking about Alex Scott and if Xabi Alonso might look at Alex Scott and think, I fancy him more than I fancy Enzo Fernández. That's all a matter of opinion. That's all up to the manager. It's the idea that you solve a problem for Man City, because I know Fernández is not Rodri, he's not the same player at all, but it allows them to set up in a way that covers for Rodri a bit more. It allows them to play Elliot Anderson in a certain way, and you just think, why would you do that? Why would you? I keep looking back at, say, Tottenham, and that period when Tottenham sold their best player to Manchester United virtually every season, Michael Carrick, Berbatov, and wondered why they were permanently fifth and Manchester United were permanently first. And you go, well, because they needed a centre forward, and you sold him. You sold them your centre forward and solved their problem for them. And I just don't understand why you would solve Manchester City's problem. But at the start of the summer, and that's what I said in the piece, at the start of the window, okay, if you can get a load of money from Manchester City, they haven't sold Rodri yet. So you're thinking, right, we'll sell him Fernández, we'll get someone we like as much as Fernández. We don't know that Fernández and Rodri are going to work together. We get an awful lot of money as well. Yeah, that all makes sense. But now we all know what Man City's problem. We saw it against Bournemouth. Everyone's looking at it going, Rodri, they really miss Rodri. He's got Mark Guehi in central midfield. They really miss Rodri. And then along come Chelsea and say, we'll sort that one out for you, lad.
So where do they sell him, though, then, Mark? If they're... who do you sell him? Because there's only a number of clubs who can pay that fee.
But that's if you do sell him. If you do sell him.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about transfers. That's a good point, because it's not, part of this market is that the Premier League operates in its own world now.
But Tony, I totally agree. But it's whether you do, it's. I said it was a 6-pointer.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what it is, because you've got Man City and Chelsea, and so that makes Man City stronger. It makes Chelsea slightly weak. So it works like the old 6-point game.
You do it if you don't think he's as good as the other club do.
No, that's true.
Yeah. And Chelsea, I've had him for a few years, and maybe they haven't taken the final step with him in the midfield. Maybe their judgment would be, this is a bit of a hospital pass for Man City. I don't know.
Mate, you could be right. You could be right. That would be the only reason.
Okay. What about Fulham, Johnny? You cited them as one of your teams possibly at risk in the preview show. There's probably some evidence to back that up, but also some positive signs as well.
Yeah, they were better than I expected. Partly Josh King was so good. Yeah. He just looked like he's really made that leap. And, I think he'd big contender for the England squad when it comes out next month. But I didn't see, it didn't change my opinion on Fulham. It made me think they might actually be more fun to watch than I'd expected. But I don't know, how many games are they going to win? They still looked a bit porous at the back. A conspicuously new manager in the Premier League. Look, as I say, better than expected, but ultimately lost the game, will lose quite a lot of games, and it's how they stick with the new manager and the project in those circumstances.
Okay. Other opening weekend thoughts, Martin. You wrote another column this week saying basically place your bets if you dare, because more than any other, we're talking about still a lot of movement to happen in the transfer market between now and Tuesday. After the World Cup, that was all delayed, and it seems that even more than ever, we don't really know what teams are going to look like until Tuesday.
I think that that the World Cup has thrown everything out of kilter, really, because there's so many. It's so much of a longer tournament now, and there's so many players that aren't properly fit. And then you look at a result, like say, let's take Brentford 3, Tottenham 0, and Brentford looked really good. Brentford looked really good. If there's two sort of bankable teams that you look at in that first week, one is Arsenal, that Arsenal are going to be good, and two, that Brentford are probably going to be, once again, pound for pound, the best team in the league in terms of their expenditure or whatever. Their recruitment is so smart. You look at Sangha and think, gee whiz, like every single elite club must be looking at that and looking at their director of football and thinking, where were you,
missed that one.
Why didn't we know about him? But anyway, that Tottenham team, what have they got there? They get beat 3-0 and everyone's going, same old Tottenham. But actually, it's not the same old Tottenham, because they've got 3, maybe 4 players in that team that will be in their team when everyone's fit and available. Once they've done all their recruitment, once people have got back from the World Cup. I mean, Maresca he named about 4 or 5 players in the Manchester City team. The big ones, you're talking about Haaland and players like that, and described them as still in pre-season. And they're playing Bournemouth at home, and Bournemouth are a decent team. Bournemouth are a good team. They're gonna cause you problems. And he's talking about half of his starting lineup being in pre-season. And that's all I meant with that, is that I can't think of a season where you're looking at this first round of games and thinking, well, I know that the point of, having a bet is that you go early. But on this one, you're just looking at it and thinking, Aston Villa, the hell are Aston Villa going to look like in 7 days' time?
Yeah.
Compared to that first day of the season. I don't think Brighton are 4 goals better than Aston Villa throughout the entire season.
The early game, you had Manchester United versus Hull, okay? They were at Hull and think, cool, that's going to be a big story on over the weekend. And then by 5:30, you've just seen Tottenham, they get done 3-0 at Brentford. And then I go to Brighton on the Sunday and thinking, well, the 2 big stories are going to be Monday morning. Then I'm 4-0. Villa are 4-0 down after literally half an hour. And could have been, by the way, it was only because Brighton took the foot off the pedal. It was nothing else. It could have gone 5 and 6 pretty quickly. So the whole story of the weekend, I said last week, and I just think it's going to be a load of goals this year. Goals galore. I just don't see. There's so many teams that look like they're going to have an attacking sort of setup to the way they're going to play. And Martin's right to talk about the Villa and what team will they have next up. They could have at least 8 different players in that team. So I just think it's going to be more of that for the next couple of weeks.
Johnny, you wrote a feature last Sunday, actually, about, there's obviously 9 new managers in the Premier League, and you think there's still actually the kind of, although, we just said goodbye to Pep Guardiola, he's been the kind of guiding hand for so many years, but you feel that there's more of an influence of Jurgen Klopp still being felt than you see the sort of style of football in the Premier League.
I think that's the direction of travel we saw last season, where you strip away the set pieces, which were a different subject, and they were one of the big changes. But the other big change was just the return to directness, move away from possession. Man City themselves under Pep had the lowest possession for 5 years and their fastest sort of rate of attacking because they went with Semenyo and they were trying to play earlier at Haaland. So even Pep was starting to move a little bit away from that style of football. And I think what you're seeing is coaches that are being brought in who are intense, who play quickly, who go straight to goal like Klopp liked to do. Also, just that charisma that Klopp had, I think, is being felt when it comes to teams recruiting managers and who do they want to put in front of the fans. If you say to the fans, well, this guy's a bit of a Jurgen Klopp, fans around the country are pretty happy. So I do think that plays a part as well. But I think Tony's right. There'll be a lot of goals this season. I think what we saw in the opening weekend was teams not wasting much time, apart from Man City under Maresca, sort of, going sideways and square, trying to. The counter press is really big. Winning the ball back and going straight to goal in Klopp's style. I think we saw a lot of that, and we'll see a lot of that throughout the season. And I think it could make a great season. We could have that without the set pieces, which would give us a lot of entertainment.
I think it's very interesting the point you made as well, that it might be perceived as easier to play the Klopp way than
underdogs.
To play the Guardiola way. But when you looked at some of the matches at the weekend, you're thinking, it ain't easy to play the Klopp way because you've got to work so hard. You've got to work, and you looked at Tottenham, you looked at Manchester United, you're thinking, you're not working hard enough, fellas. You're just not working hard enough. You're not, you're not running about enough, basically. I know it sounds very, very unsophisticated, but there was a lot of that with Klopp. There was a lot of keep the energy high, run about, tear into them. There was, it looks easy, but it's not easy.
Well, you look at Tielemans and Santos in midfield from Manchester United, and they clearly looked undercooked, and whatever they'd done since the World Cup. I mean, Tielemans they come out the last 16, was it? Last 8?
Yeah, like that,
16-8. Some of them would have gone away, come back, and not much time to get themselves back on great. I mean, we've done it a couple of times, Gregor. I'll say more than a couple of times. Pre-seasons. I always felt
not after a World Cup, unfortunately, Tom.
No, okay. Well, but if you look back at pre-seasons, you always feel like the best pre-seasons followed with a really good season.
Yeah.
I always felt that it was money in the bank for me. Like, as in, I felt great, Nick. When I had injuries during pre-season and come back, I was playing catch-up with everybody. And I felt I paid a price for it, especially at Celtic.
Listen, about Celtic the better at the moment, Tony. Anyway, one of the advantages of being in this chair is you get to decide when to move on. Now we're going to move on. After the break, as I say, we'll be talking about some of the big transfers that have happened in the last couple of days and more to come. So, in that theme, I'm going to ask a simple question after asking a ridiculously hard question on Monday. Who was the first €100 million player? Find out the answer after the break. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. I'm Gregor Robertson alongside Jonathan Northcroft, Martin Samuel and Tony Cascarino. Before the break, I asked the quiz question, which was, who was the first €100 million player? Johnny, you were in there.
It was Gareth Bale. And the reason I remember that, I remember the story at the time where I think in pounds the fees were Cristiano Ronaldo had moved the year before for 80 million. And because the exchange rate had changed, then the Bale one was worth 85 million, which was 100 million euros. But Real Madrid had to hide that because Cristiano was going to get upset if Gareth Bale or anyone cost more than him. So they had some formula where there were add-ons that they announced, but in reality, he cost more than Cristiano.
Neymar was the first that crossed the £100 million threshold, I think, when he went to PSG in 2017. And Jack Grealish was the first £100 million player in the Premier League in 2023. Now they're happening every other week.
Well, if you're a central midfield player and you're not £100 million now, you're phoning up your agent. What's wrong with me?
That schoolboy that Man City have signed for 85 million.
Yeah, 85
Played one
million.
season or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good player, by the way. But
Yeah, he's a very good player. But
So what's happening? As I said, Bradley Barcola, we believe, is on the verge of completing a £120 million transfer between PSG and Liverpool. There was Elliot Anderson, there was Morgan Rogers, Enzo Fernández still could. Is this, are we inflating a bubble here? Is the Premier League operating in its own universe? What's happening, Martin?
yeah, well, it is, isn't it? Because you're not going to get those figures. None of those players will get those figures in any European league other than this one. So it is our little bubble, and the going rate. It seems quite bizarre what the going rate is now. Like every central midfield player is £100 million virtually, and there's certain transfers that are taking place, and you cannot work out where what has Delap done, what has Liam Delap done in the last year or so at Chelsea to virtually double his fee. You're thinking, well, all he ever does, all I ever see him do is smash his elbow, smash straight into the defender, get himself booked and not score.
That's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but you did score. No, but
one Premier League goal.
One Premier League goal. And Tonali, right? And no one mentions Tonali. Tonali's a £100 million player. Have a look at his goals and assists last season. They're virtually non-existent. And he's playing for Newcastle. He's not playing for, they're not mugs, Newcastle. I mean, I know they didn't have the best domestic season last year, but they're far from mugs. Doesn't create a goal, barely creates a goal, but it doesn't score a goal. £100 million.
It's a weird one.
No,
I was going to say, it's a weird...
The only way you can be worth £100 million if you don't score and you're not creating and scoring is if you're N'Golo Kante. And he's not N'Golo Kante.
No.
Either.
Just on the fees in general, it feels like, and I'm going back now, I'm getting a bit nostalgic about it, is that if you didn't play well in a season, your fee didn't go up. People pay less for you. Yeah. Now you can have a difficult season. I mean, Nico Gonzalez is going for 50 million. Now, okay, didn't play a lot. I don't remember having that much of an impact at City. No. And he goes for 50 million. And it feels like there's a few of them where they've not actually played that well and the year before, and yet someone's prepared to go, oh, well, we'll give you that for him. Nottingham Forest paying 45 for Liam Delap. He might prove to be a great signing. And it's a big might, by the way, because there's a lot of evidence should be like, well, I'm not so sure. He's got to improve a hell of a lot. Johnny?
I think there's also, like any market, scarcity values a big element. So with strikers, and there's a dearth, and it's obvious that's why Liam Delap, despite his one goal in 12 months, how many other English striking options are there? There's a cachet to that. But even Nicholas Jackson spends almost 2 years on the bench. But again, there's a lack of viable number 9 options. And then I think with central midfielders, and it partly relates to the style of play thing we've been talking about, because the game's now getting stretched and it's so quick, everyone's looking for those central midfield players who can cover the ground, who can somehow stop counter-attacks and maybe attack as well. So that's why you're seeing the Tonalis and the Elliot Andersons fetching a huge premium. So there's an unreality to every market, I suppose. It's a market conditions that set a value, and the actual worth of what you're buying. It's like houses, isn't it? It's set by the environment as much as the thing itself. And I think we're seeing that with players at the moment. So
let's look at a few of them. I think we'll start with some of the more eye-catching ones for the same reason, about value. So, Savinho in brackets, 75 million rising to 85 million. That's an extraordinary amount of money for a player with, again, so little output over...
Started well, first couple of games, everyone's looking at him going, oh, they've got a player here. And then after that, it sort of tailed off and he couldn't get in the team. And suddenly he's 85 million.
There's two parts to this conversation, though. I mean, yes, there's the value aspect. Spurs are approaching the best part of £400 million. If you throw in Omar Marmoush, whose loan will be... They have an obligation to turn it permanent for £60 million next summer. Clearly... you can look at the value, but you also got to analyse what this is doing to Spurs' squad. So, like, will those two players make Spurs better, do you think, Johnny? Will they make them be able to compete for the kind of level they want to be competing at?
Yeah, I said this last week when I didn't fancy Spurs for the top 6, like a lot of people. I don't think they've signed any bad players, but they haven't signed the elite, is what I'm trying to say. I think they've signed that slight tier down, and I would put both Marmoush and Savio in the same bracket. Even Tonali. I mean, Tonali's maybe the best of the signings, but like Fernández, like Van Hecke, they're just not quite top.
The problem started the year before, really. It goes to some of the money that Liverpool spent and went crazy and went over 100 million a couple of times, and so other clubs have been caught up. And it's mainly the big 6. It's not really involving anybody else, is it?
No, because Brentford aren't suddenly spending
they've got 42 million, haven't they, on Sagari?
I think there's one other thing, which is the Premier League is still, unlike, let's say, La Liga, it is a market where the money goes on fees and not into players' wages quite to the same extent. And you see that with a Vinny Jr., where he was kept at Real Madrid on a wage so far beyond what anyone could pay in England. So I still think that that's partly it as well. The money's being spent in between clubs rather than going into players' pockets. People might go, well, so and so earns 400 grand a week, but that's still small compared to the top wages elsewhere.
Okay. Ayub Buadi, Manchester City. Martin, is someone I think you would have seen at the World Cup?
Yeah, saw him at the World Cup, saw him play Brazil in the very first game, and they looked very, very good. Didn't always look as good as that. He's very, very young. It's an enormous amount of money to pay for a player that young. But everyone was saying, he's the next cab off the rank, he's the best teenager, this. So, in a few years' time, it might seem, the money well spent, and it might seem, oh yes, you can see why they did. In a few years' time, you could be looking at it and thinking, well, that was a hell of a gamble. It's a much bigger gamble than City usually take. They've done a couple of things this summer that are gambles in the way that sort of Guardiola and cheeky Begaristan didn't gamble that much. You think of the players that they pulled out of when it got 50 odd million for Fred, and they suddenly went, no, we're not doing that. When Harry Maguire got to over 60 or 70 or whatever, and it went, right, no, we're not involved.
It's not a financial gamble, though, is it? If what we just talked about, if Buadi doesn't do it, they'll still get a lot of money for him. And his age obviously will play a part. So it's more of I totally agree it's a gamble on him being 18 and being put into the team. Yeah. But more than financial, because...
do you not think that one has got 85 is such a ceiling? It's not like it's 40 million and, you can be a Man City for 2 years and increase your price to 60 million on not very much.
You might have said the same about Enzo Fernández. This is an interesting point to bring back in now, is that Chelsea, with the sales of Jackson and Delap, under Blueco, so 4 years of their ownership, have now sold £1 billion worth of players. Sold £1 billion. So we all talk about the amount that they spend, which is eye-watering, and it's almost double that. But the model in its sort of own way is kind of just about turning out to show that it's working, Johnny.
Well, financially, yeah.
Not in a sporting sense.
Not in a sporting sense. I think they do too much trading. When you keep having 20 players in, 20 players out, or 15 in, 15 out, what are you going to build? I was looking at their bench at the weekend, and there's Jamie Gittins, and it's like, he was part of the winger churn last year when Madueke goes out, but the financially, yes, it's clear they are good traders. They're not making many sort of value mistakes, and they've definitely learned the art of selling at the right time. It's just how you square that with the sporting need to build a settled team or settled squad.
And yet you look at other deals, like say Trossard. I know he only had a year left or whatever, but look at him last season. 6 goals, 6 assists. I know assists can be deceptive, but 6 goals. Of those 6 goals, 2 of them are the only goal of a game. one of them that beats Fulham, one of them that beats West Ham. Massively important goals for Arsenal. 17 million to go to Besiktas.
Yeah.
And you think, that doesn't seem... 17 million for that guy, who we've seen be very important to a team that's won the title, and 85 million for Savio. And you look at that and think, that seems totally disproportionate.
Nothing makes sense in the market. I mean, even if you take Minter at Brighton, you know, in and out the team at Brighton, and what about Liverpool, 50 million?
And he's injured.
Yeah, and he's been
And he's injured, by the way.
And hasn't had his bet. I mean, I like him as a player. We all do. If you go and watch him, he's a real handful.
Yeah, I like him.
Again, I don't know if football can make sense of what's going on in the transfer market.
A lot of moving parts as well. I mean, so we're coming to Aston Villa now, and Saudi Arabia's emergence, and they're willing to pay £50 million for Ollie Watkins at the age of, I think, 30.
Yeah.
That's another kind of dynamic at play as well now. What do you make of Aston Villa, Tony, now? I mean, like we keep talking, we've talked about this a lot because we're going, oh my God, they're ripping the heart of their team with Digne, Rodgers, Tielemans. Then they lose Konsa and you go, oh, it's getting worse. Then Watkins looks like he's off. Martinez might even be off.
Yeah.
Like, that's really all of the spine of...
Well, he's not going to be number one. So that's, you know, if you're a World Cup winning goalkeeper, it's very unlikely you're going to stay at the football club. Okay, and they've lost a huge amount of experience. The last two standing really for me would be Matty Cash, who's still there, and John McGinn. I don't imagine that any of them two are going to go. But it's a problem for Villa because he's going to have to rebuild. Unai Emery's got the biggest challenge he's had since he's been at Villa. And I do expect him to change it around. But you can't keep getting rid of players in big numbers who have been vitally important. It's like saying tomorrow we go, right, take Arsenal, we go, well, Rice is going to go, Raya's going to go, or whoever, Odegaard, all big players for you. And you go, we're going to go. We're going to move on from there. That's really hard to do.
I think you can see the pain that Unai Emery is going through at the moment, you know, in the interviews and press appearances, because that's a guy that's performing at his maximum. That's a guy who, over 3-4 years at Villa, has knocked it out of the park. So I guess as a coach, if you're doing the best you possibly can, and yet the club, for whatever reason, and I don't think with Villa's owners, by the way, it's a lack of investment. It's a lack of the ability to invest because of financial fair play. But when you're doing your absolute maximum, and yet you keep getting pulled backwards by losing players.
See, they've been there before when they lost, I think, Southgate, Etiog, Bosnich.
And they did it later.
They had about 4 or 5 go at it, and they went that way very quickly.
And they did it later when that sort of Gareth Barry team, didn't they, that got broken up. Milner.
Broken up.
It's a bit of a...
Do you think Unai Emery will accept this, though?
No, I mean, the thing with...
You might have wanted to have done it the year before. You never know.
Yeah. Look, the club has been built internally around him. You know, he's got his mate and his sporting director, and he's got another mate as...
And they're sort of designing things like the salaries and stuff like that. Yeah. You know, they've got a lot more... He's got a lot more say at Villa than contemporaries at other clubs.
Yeah. What he's never done in his career, and few really have, is, because it's something that happens in English football more than the continent, is stay at a club for 5, 6, 7, 8 years and build. Emery's been a 3-year, 4-year manager, succeeds, moves on. And this is new territory for him.
I suppose the last point of this conversation then, Martin, is the kind of spending rules. Because if you look at what's happened to Villa this summer and Newcastle, two teams who've come closest to kind of breaking into that, the elite, for want of a better word, are now being dragged back to earth. And yes, and before you say it, you've written about this for a long, long time.
I was going to say, what I should do, I should have it put on a record. I should write about it, shouldn't I? I should have it put on a record, and then when these questions come up, I can just drop the needle on it, and you can just recite it and just play it. Yeah.
Go on then, off you go.
Look, mate, look. It's one of those things. Some of it is so unnecessary because Aston Villa and Newcastle, they do have the wherewithal to... The club is not in jeopardy. They're not going to... I can understand rules to stop clubs getting into financial trouble and everything, but Aston Villa and Newcastle are not going to be in financial trouble. They have got good revenue streams. They have got good income. And increasingly what you're looking at is, if you became a big club before these rules come in, you're okay. You're always going to be okay. Manchester United will always be okay. Arsenal will always be okay. They can not win anything for 2 decades, and as soon as they get it half right, they will have the capacity to get it properly right. Whereas if you weren't a big club before the financial rules came in, if you start to get it right, then there is suddenly this glass ceiling that you hit up against. It says, oh, no. You weren't big enough 20 years ago. So there you go, this is your glass ceiling. And then everyone says, oh, it can all be done organically. No, it can't, because everyone comes in and raids all your players, which is what's happened to Aston Villa. And what happens to Nottingham Forest, and what happens to all of these, or Newcastle and all of these clubs. So that is a fundamental problem. I'm banging on about it to no avail for many, many years, but I'm not going to stop saying it because I know it's right. That in the end, I've never been against having some financial rules and some financial controls. You've got to have that as a protection. But these ones actually work against the ambitious middle clubs, basically, the ones that weren't big when the Champions League was first minted. The modern kind of. If you weren't big before these came in, you've got a real problem. There is a glass ceiling that doesn't exist for Arsenal, Manchester United and Liverpool and clubs of those size.
Is there a solution, Johnny?
Well, I think the changing regulations are, if I understand them correctly, there's a bit more leeway with the move to squad cost ratio for owner investment, a bit more. It's a sort of more of a halfway house. But would I be right in thinking this is the first year of the accounting cycle of squad cost ratio, and so we're in a funny period with this kind of last year of the old system.
Last year of the old system.
But look, you could unpick how football operates both politically and financially and solve it. But without doing that, I'm not sure, because as Martin sort of alluded to, part of this is being legislated by the very richest clubs who would rather like to stay in the position they're in, and it's happening at European level as well, isn't it, with the ECA?
Aston Villa's big problem is not so much the Premier League. Aston Villa's big problem is Uefa. All of their sales are linked much more to complying with UEFA regulations at the moment than the Premier League ones.
Yeah, I interviewed Francesco Calvo, who arrived at Villa last year from Monaco, and he'd worked in Italy as a new kind of head of. They divided the sort of football side into business and football ops, and his remit was to bring in more money, get the revenue in that's going to allow this Villa expansion. But there's only so much you can do on that side, and all his ideas, getting more sponsorship in the city of Birmingham, and bringing the offices into the training ground at Bodymore Heath, and not it's scratching the surface. He's a bright man, but what can you really affect? Yeah.
There's only so much you can do at Aston Villa. There is, because it's Aston. That's what they're finding with Newcastle. Newcastle are a very big club in Newcastle. Yeah. And that is the problem that they will have, that the ownership will have. That it's very hard to make Newcastle Manchester United, because they haven't got the European pedigree and all of these things.
Could I just ask a quick question? Now, with so much American owners, and they must have franchises, and I'm not big into American sport anyway, but surely they get competitiveness, don't they? They still have big clubs like the Dallas Cowboys and the...
things like the draft, mate.
But how do they manoeuvre through all these financial issues? Is it just football that is blessed with this, you're going to be held back?
Well, they tend to be sealed kind of environments, don't they? They tend to be sealed leagues where you can't drop out of them franchise-wise, and nobody regulates from the outside. So you don't have Europe, sort of, as in the UEFA, sort of putting their tuppence in. And then... So
handcuffs on football in Europe then, is it?
Well, it's just a different system, isn't it? Because we want merit. We do want promotion, relegation. We want all of that. But what happens in America is you don't. And then the owners get to create all the rules. And we don't really want that either. We want some sort of... And then the final thing is, I suppose, they don't really have a transfer market. The money goes straight into the players. which is a different way of paying.
I'll give you one of the things they do. You tell me if you ever see this coming. If you buy a New York Yankees cap or a shirt or whatever in Philadelphia, who gets the money?
The shop.
No, who gets the money? Because it's not the Yankees.
Oh, it's not the Yankees.
It gets split. They get all of the money from the Yankees merchandise sold in the New York area. Anything that's sold outside of the New York area gets split through the league. So
the league get.
So no, between all the other franchises. Right. So if Manchester United, every time someone buys a Manchester United shirt in Coventry, want to split the proceeds of that 20 ways, we might get somewhere near to where they are in America. But Manchester United want the money from their shirts. They don't just want the money from their shirts in Manchester, they want the money from their shirts everywhere. But in America, that's how it works. And it's a very, very, where there's no relegation and things like that. It's a totally different system. And it's really, really regimented financially. But it can be, because it's regimented in many other ways as well.
Well, Newcastle and Villa will get a reminder of their difficulties this weekend when they face a player they've just recently sold, Sandro Tonali, for Spurs, and Ezri Konsa for Arsenal. 2 big games this weekend. Just finally to end the show, we've got another story on the Times website by Martin Ziegler, who of course has led the remarkable story about Gianni Infantino and FIFA. UEFA calls off threatened boycott of FIFA tournaments. Cue laughter from Mark and Samuel. But they do say they're going to step up efforts to remove Infantino. What do you make of this, Martin? Have they bottled it?
The great bottling? Yeah, the great
Is
bottling.
Is Infantino going to survive?
Mate, if this is his opposition, yes. Mate, I referred to it in the Sunday Times column last week as the great bottling will begin, very shortly. And look, with the greatest respect to the Women's Under-20 World Cup, right? I mean, no disrespect to this tournament, but if they are not prepared to go FIFA on the Women's Under-20 World Cup, what chance you possibly think there is of going FIFA on the Men's World Cup, the Women's World Cup, the Club World Cup, any of their absolute marquee events? What chance do you think there is of any of these countries, any of these federations being brave enough to make a stand at those very, very high-profile tournaments when they're not actually prepared even to make a stand in the Women's Under-20 World Cup?
We should say England are due to fly to Poland on Monday for that tournament, the FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup. So that's fast approaching. So this is a kind of...
It's fast, but we've named a squad. I mean, there's not much point in naming a squad unless you prepare it to go. And that's when, look, the minute it was still being held in Poland, you knew that there was a problem with this idea that there was going to be a boycott, because the last time I looked, Poland was in Europe. So there's never been any suggestion that Poland were going to say, no, we're not hosting it, we're boycotting. So Poland were hosting it, and then I think it was France named their squad, and then Spain named their squad, and then panic at the FA who were meant to name their squad last Thursday, and they put it back for 24 hours due to operational difficulties, bless them. So, everyone was running around looking for a spine. Couldn't find one, so the following day they named their squad, because the one thing we're not going to do, we're not outliers. When we thought we were in a gang of 50 odd or 100 odd, we were very, very brave. The minute it looks like the gang's all mizzled away, I don't see us as man in the barricades on our own. So this is where we are, and. It's going to be very hard, because now it's a battle. And I don't fancy us in a battle. I don't think our FA are brave in these sort of battles at all, because all they actually want to do is be on the winning team.
Do you think Johnny, is Infantino going to survive?
Well, it's looking a lot more likely now than it did before the boycott was abandoned. I think UEFA have made it a lot worse by saying we're going to, or
Going to
might boycott and
Absolutely.
not doing it. If they hadn't mentioned that, then, you know, we're going to do it through the media and politically. But by, you know, issuing the threat and then not following it up, they've weakened themselves for sure. And it was weird, the kind of spin of like, they're going to not do the boycott, but they're going to redouble their efforts to get him out. How does that
Took away a big...
How does that match together?
Yeah. Well, you can stay on top of that story by following Martin Ziegler's reporting on the Times website. We'll be back to review all the weekend's action on Monday. Hope to see you then.